I mean, he told his own disciples, hey, Yogi, I'm going to put you on the hot corner at your base.
Any corner you want, Maharaj.
On the one hand, Prabhupada, he told his own disciples, we have the mass, we need the class. And of course, most of his disciples didn't realize what he was actually saying to them or about them. Prabhupada had a vision. And Prabhupada had a vision of what he actually wanted to accomplish. And as Prabhupada's followers, either his initiated disciple or his follower, Prabhupada is the founder Acharya. That's one important point to keep in mind, that Prabhupada certainly considered, as he had to consider, because it was obviously true, that of the two positions he held, he was a Diksha Guru for everyone in ISKCON at the time, but at the same time he was the founder Acharya. And when Prabhupada had to introduce himself to, in serious situations, important people, he wouldn't say, allow me to introduce myself, I am the Diksha Guru of ISKCON. He would say, I'm the founder Acharya, which is a much higher position because, as we can see, hundreds and hundreds and ultimately thousands of gurus will serve the founder Acharya. So on the covers of his books, Prabhupada was very specific, and he was he would not compromise on exactly how he wanted to be presented on the covers of his own books. He didn't say, it doesn't say, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Diksha Guru of ISKCON. It says founder Acharya. And so the relevant point here is that if you are actually, I think that'll go, right? Okay. So, that's good. All of you who are faithfully following Prabhupada have exactly the same equal access to Prabhupada as I do. It's not that because if we, of course, there's an etiquette, which I like very much because I always get first in line for food, prasadam, but which, I'm not going to let go of that. Let me just turn my phone off for a second. Sorry about that. There is an etiquette that has to be followed because Vaishnavas always strictly follow etiquette. But in terms of the opportunity that each of you has to form a powerful relationship with Prabhupada, everyone has exactly the same opportunity. Because the etiquette is, if I'm following my guru, Prabhupada initiated me in 1970, so whoever initiated you, if you follow the proper etiquette, then by following that etiquette, you have direct access to Prabhupada as your founder Acharya. Because if that were not the case, it would lead to an absurd result. As I said, if someone states that something is true, but if it's true, it leads to an absurd conclusion, then it must not be true. And so if we say that those who were initiated by Prabhupada have a greater opportunity to know him, to please him, does this one work too? Reminds me of a funny thing they say in Brazil. Well, Brazil tem tudo, mas nada funciona. Of course, it means Brazil has everything, but nothing works. Anyway, yeah, they say it, I don't say it. So the point is, if it were the fact that I have necessarily, regardless of how much I actually surrender to Prabhupada's mission, if it were the case that I have greater access to Prabhupada, a more intimate relation, it would lead to an absurd conclusion. The absurd conclusion would be that with every passing generation, the members of ISKCON get farther and farther away from Prabhupada, which is absurd. Because what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita is that Jejata Mam Prapadyante. As everyone surrenders to me, Tams Tataiva Bhajamyaham. Exactly in that way, I reciprocate with them. Whatever anyone does, even if they're an atheist, they cannot help approaching Krishna because Krishna is everything. Vasudeva Sarvamiti.
Hey, Chuparo.
I have to say it's somewhat normal. So surrendering to Prabhupada does not mean that you had amazing anecdotal experiences. In Mayapur in I think it was January, February, Prabhupada invited me to stay with him for a month before the Mayapur festival. And it was very ecstatic every day. I mean, many times I'd go for a walk. I was the only person on the walk with Prabhupada. So it was very ecstatic, intimate association. Mayapur then consisted of one building, and then the boundary rooms, and they were building the long building. So it was very, very blissful just to sort of hang out with a Shakti Avashavatar. I highly recommend the experience. But then as the festival was coming to an end, I went into Prabhupada's room, and as soon as I walked into his room, paid obeisance, he immediately said to me, "This personal association is not so important. Go out and preach." And I remember many nights in 72 and 73 especially, when Hare Krishna was traveling with me, and it's amazing, after about 50 years of therapy, he's actually getting over that experience. Not completely, but... So anyway, we would sleep in a van. All day we would sell books and preach at colleges, and the last thing we heard at night was Prabhupada's voice singing bhajan. And every night we would fall asleep, and we were there with Prabhupada, or he was there with us. And so since it is philosophically or theologically a fact that every one of you has exactly the same opportunity to cultivate an intimate personal relationship with Prabhupada, then the question is, what does that even mean? If the goal of life is to please the Acharya, how do you please Prabhupada? And Prabhupada made that very clear. What pleased him is saving the planet. Prabhupada, many times when I was alone with Prabhupada, he would sort of reveal his mind to me. And there are many amazing things he told me. And somehow he trusted me to tell me these things. And so my mother one time I took my mother to see Prabhupada, which was really like two worlds colliding, but Jewish mother and Prabhupada in the same room. And so it's funny, Prabhupada immediately captured my mother's heart. The first thing he told her was, "Your son is very intelligent." And then after that, Prabhupada could do no wrong. But Prabhupada came to this world for only one reason, and that is to save it. Prabhupada had no business in this world. Nothing in this world attracted him. He didn't come as sort of an interplanetary tourist. He didn't come out of curiosity. Prabhupada came to this planet only to save it. So the more that you and I are working very hard, because Prabhupada worked hard, and it would be kind of shameful not to work as hard as Prabhupada did. especially those who were younger, and even those who were not younger. So Prabhupada had no other purpose. He was always in his mission. Prabhupada could be laughing, joking. When I was I stayed with him in Mayapur for a month. He would sometimes tell me jokes, usually at the expense of Indians. But anyway, he would tell me jokes. And sometimes he was very serious. But at every moment, whether he was joking, resting, eating, walking, preaching, at every moment, he was in his mission. Even if he was relaxing for Krishna. And the word that Krishna uses in Bhagavad Gita is yukta. Yukta comes from the Sanskrit root yuj dhatu. And it means, we still have this root yuj in English in words like conjugal, which means interconnection, or from this root yuj you have the word yoga, from which you get English words like yoke, to yoke two things together, to connect them. So if yoga means linking, then the word yukta means linked, Linked, And so Krishna often uses this word in the Gita to indicate that someone is in a state of yoga, someone is connected to Krishna. And Prabhupada would sometimes translate that as on the spiritual platform. So Prabhupada was always yukta. In fact, Krishna says that in the Gita, nitya yukta upasate. The great devotees are always connected to me. Nitya yukta upasate, and they worship me. So there's a famous story in history, which may actually be true, that while Rome was burning, the decadent Emperor Nero was just playing his fiddle. So we should not only be tuning our harmoniums while the world is going to hell. In other words, of course we should do kirtan, it's the Sankirtan movement. But Prabhupada, in his discussion with Professor Stahl, the Indologist at UC Berkeley, who knew everything about Vedic culture except what it actually meant, Prabhupada said that, Krishna says, you can recognize my devotees because they are satatam kirtayanto mang. They're always glorifying me. This is the verb, kirtayantaha. Like there's the word kirtanam. And so Prabhupada explained to him that preaching about Krishna, explaining philosophy, that is also kirtan, of course, which it is. Kirtan means to glorify, to praise. So therefore, I think that we have a lot of fun pointing out all the miserable, ignorant aspects of Kali Yuga. It's kind of like keeps up ISKCON's collective self-esteem. When we point out and realize, because it is kind of a somewhat barbaric age, and the ignorance is all pervading. But we also have to be capable of self-criticism. We have to be capable of self-criticism both individually and collectively as a society. And Prabhupada, he wasn't shy about telling ISKCON when it was on track and when it was off track. And these are measurable things. Prabhupada claimed this is a spiritual science, and actually, I have to admit, I joined the movement. It wasn't only the food. It's always also the food. But also, I wanted a spiritual science. I wasn't looking for a religion. I already had one. My parents gave me one. And I actually experienced God within the religion I got from my parents. What I didn't have was a science of God. And so, in a science, are we really, for example, if someone comes to a Hare Krishna temple, do they get a better, warmer reception than they would in a church? Which is very competitive, because when you go to many churches, especially churches with intelligent people, they really go out of their way to make you feel welcome. So, just think about Hare Krishna temples around the country, around the world. Do we give the best reception? And here's, I think, a very important point. Are our bathrooms the cleanest? Don't answer that question. And Krishna actually gives cleanliness as one of the qualities of Brahman. Are we Brahmins? Are we the cleanest people in the world? Are we the kindest people, the most compassionate? Do we do everything in our power to make people feel comfortable? When we go out on the street to do Harinam, it's very interesting because if a devotee opens a restaurant and there's like real money involved, you can be sure the devotees will be extremely attentive to public taste because it affects the bottom line. So devotee restaurants, they're extremely concerned about what the public likes and doesn't like. When we go out on the street to Harinam, there's no money involved, so who cares? Take it or leave it. You want to save your soul? Listen. You want to go to hell? Don't listen. But actually, to what extent are we going out of our way to make people comfortable? Because, as Rupa Goswami said, Ado Shraddha Tatak Sadhu Sangha. Even if people have a little bit of faith, Ado in the beginning, Adi Kale, if in the beginning people have a little faith, Ado Shraddha Tatak, then from that, Sadhu Sangha. If people cannot identify with us, if people see us on the street and they cannot think, wow, that could be me, I could be doing that. If people don't think that way, they will not come for Sadhu Sangha. And if they don't come for Sadhu Sangha, there will be no bhajana kriya. There will be no devotional activities. Western devotees tend to say bhajan, which means container, actually, in Sanskrit. Anyway, but that's okay. I mean, Krishna understands. So it's bhajana kriya. So how, of course, according to Rupa Goswami, we don't violate our basic principles. Rupa Goswami makes a distinction between basic principles that you cannot change, our basic philosophy, our basic spiritual practice. No one can change that. But there are details, how we dress, what kind of food we prepare to offer, what kind of music we make. Those are details. There is no Vaishnava Shastra. There's no Vaishnava Shastra in existence that says that how you dress, what exactly the style of music you make, exactly what recipes you cook with, that these things are basic principles. In fact, just one quick little reference for those who actually are interested in what the Bhagavatam says. The Bhagavatam says that as a sannyasi, I have a few dress options. And so, we can vote, like, tell me which one you'd rather see me in. One is I could wear rags, which, the second one is I could wear deerskin, hopefully with Velcro, so it stays on. Or the third one is wear nothing, become a naga. Actually, naga in Indian languages is nagna in Sanskrit, naked. That's what the word naked comes from Sanskrit nagna. So it's very interesting. Those are three options, naked, deerskin, or rags. And especially deerskin and naked. Actually, the rags is kind of like not one of the top options. Now, what's interesting is this is in the Bhagavatam. And Lord Chaitanya preached that the Bhagavatam is our most important Shastra. And yet Mahaprabhu forbid his devotees to follow the Bhagavatam on that point. Lord Chaitanya forbid, it's right there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he forbid his followers to dress in deerskin. How did he dress? One time when I went to say goodbye to Prabhupada in Vrindavan, I was leaving the festival, and he said to me, do you know that song, Bande Rupa Sanatana? I said, yes, of course. And Prabhupada said, study that. He said, the Goswamis, Shad Goswamis, the Shad Goswami Gan, Prabhupada said, they are the ideal Vaishnava sannyasis. So if you want to understand real Vaishnava sannyas, study that song. Now in that song it said about them, Kopina Kantasrito. They dressed in rags and kopins. So Lord Chaitanya doesn't follow the Bhagavatam dress code, he has a new dress code, and then our Prabhupada and Bhakti Siddhanta, they forbid the devotees to follow Mahaprabhu's dress code. I mean, if you would have tried coming in front of Prabhupada in a kopin and rags, it's like, that the sound people would have heard would be the sound of you being thrown out of the room. So, one dress code in the Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya rejects it, establishes another one. The modern acharyas reject that and do something else. Why? Because it's a detail. It is a detail. It is not a basic Vaishnava principle. In fact, who started this custom of adjusting your dress so you fit in with the society you're living in? Who started it? Krishna did. It's right in the Bhagavatam. It's right in the Bhagavatam, first chapter, where it said, Kritavan Kila Karmani Saharamena Keshava. Keshava, with Rama, performed activities in this world, Atimartyani, which were superhuman. Atimartyani Bhagavan, Guda Kapata Manusha. And Krishna was disguised, Gudha, concealed, Kapata Manusha, pretending to be a human being. That means he fit in with everyone else. And to confirm that this actually refers to the way Krishna dressed, we have a statement from Queen Kunti in her prayers when she's discussing that different scholars have different theories as to why Krishna came to this world. And in any case, she says, Krishna did come as Nato Natya Dharo Jatha. Krishna actually came to this world like an actor in costume. Like an actor in costume. So for the ultra-Orthodox, read it and weep. It's Krishna himself, Natya. Nata means like an actor or performer, dancer, and Natya is the costume. Nato Natya Dharo Jata, and that costume was Gota. It concealed Krishna. So the only thing the Western world, in my humble opinion, is ultimately going to accept from us, if you are able to understand that being a very minor, sort of increasingly forgotten ethnic church, if you can understand that that's not actually what Prabhupada wanted, that Prabhupada wanted to change this world, Prabhupada wanted to establish Lord Chaitanya's Krishna consciousness as the Yuga Dharma, not as an out-of-the-way, tiny ethnic church, then we have to understand Bhakti Yoga as a spiritual science, not as an ethnic tradition, as a spiritual science. And Prabhupada himself said repeatedly that religion without philosophy, and by philosophy, if you actually read what Prabhupada meant by the word, he used the word philosophy in the actually sort of the historical Western sense, which means just a rational understanding of everything you're doing. That's why if you get a doctorate in biology, it's a doctor of philosophy in biology. If you get a doctorate in history, it's a doctor of philosophy degree. That was the historical sense of the word philosophy, and that's the sense in which Prabhupada used it. So Prabhupada said, if you are religious, you chant Hare Krishna, you bow down to the deities, you serve the Vaishnavas, you offer your food, you follow the moral principles and so on, but you do not have a serious philosophical, rational understanding of what we're doing, based in history, not mythology, not because some sannyasi told you, with all due respect, but because it's actually in Shastra. Then Prabhupada said that religion without rational philosophy leads to sentimentalism and fanaticism. As the Romans used to say, don't kill the messenger. Those are Prabhupada's words. Sentimentalism, fanaticism, even if we are religious, but do not have a serious, rational, philosophical, history-based grasp of what we're doing. So my view is that there's no better way to honor Prabhupada than to actually give him what he wanted. Prabhupada was very happy, of course, when his followers, disciples or followers loved him and told stories about him. Of course, that pleased him. But what Prabhupada ultimately wanted was that we actually get it. That we actually understand why he came to this planet, and we give him what he wanted. And I'll end, for those of you who are starting to panic and thought that I would never end. There's a very important story told to me many times, because there's so many Prabhupada stories that turn out not to be true. So Giriraj Swami, this happened to Giriraj Swami, and so I had him tell me about 5 times and write it down so I, really get this right. Just before Prabhupada left this world, Giriraj had gone to Vrindavan to serve Prabhupada and be with him. And Prabhupada sent his servant to call Giriraj in the middle of the night, which is an unusual request. So naturally Giriraj was very anxious and ran to Prabhupada's quarters. He came into Prabhupada's room. It was dark. There was just one candle. It was the middle of the night. One candle next to Prabhupada. And finally Prabhupada called him to come forward. And he went there, and Prabhupada's body was so weak that Giriraj had to put his ear next to Prabhupada's lips to hear what Prabhupada was saying. So why had Prabhupada called him near the end, in the middle of the night? Prabhupada said to him, "When I leave, will this movement go on?" That was his concern. And I think when he said this movement, he didn't say this religious society, he said movement. In other words, something that's actually moving, growing, expanding. And so Giriraj, in his own words, sort of gave the standard answer. The company line. It's like, you're trained up to work in a company. Okay, the customer says this, you say that. So Giriraj Swami said, "Yes, Prabhupada, it will go on if we chant Hare Krishna and follow the rules." Prabhupada indicated that was not enough. He said there must be intelligence, organization. We have to intelligently understand Krishna consciousness as a universal spiritual science, not an ethnic tradition. And we have to have the intelligence to organize properly to establish this as the Yuga Dharma. We're not supposed, Prabhupada came to the West to reconstitute the Brahmin class, which has become so fallen in India. He didn't come to create Brahmins who, like in some places in India, are just sort of professional cooks. In India, that's one of their dharmas, to cook. I mean, cooking, the prasadam distribution is wonderful, especially when it's distributed to me. And also other people. So, I'm not saying we don't do that. Prasadam distribution is glorious. It's something we do. But it's not all we do. We are meant to be philosophers, teachers. Prabhupada said if his followers could teach in universities, could get academic qualifications and teach Krishna consciousness in universities, that would save America. He said it would save America and thereby save the world. He said this on June 22nd, 1975, in a room conversation in Los Angeles. So you can look it up. Anyway, I'll stop here. The great Saint Hare Krishna Maharaj is here. And actually, I had to give initiation to a lady in Rio de Janeiro in